Hi, welcome. I'm your host, Carolyn Ford. Today's webinar is Human Behavior, the Heart of a Successful Insider Threat Program, presented by Michael Kraus. Mike is Forcepoint Director of Insider Risk Programs, and he works closely with top company decision makers and lends key influence in helping them improve employee security behavior by changing the way people think about security, developing new cybersecurity policies, procedures, and technical approaches, and generating real-time actionable data derived from employee behavior and industry baselines. Mike has over 25 years of experience supporting commercial and federal organizations, starting with the National Security Agency, NSA, and expanding his career with various commercial companies. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks for the introduction, Carolyn. I really appreciate the opportunity to kind of discuss what is a heart and soul of a successful insider threat program. And it really starts with the name. I mean, people will probably deliberate over a name of a program, whether you're in the government, whether you're in a commercial. It probably takes a good 2 to 3 weeks to come up with a good name that is descriptive, but non-descriptive. In insider threat programs, in my kind of perspective, should be called insider risk programs because they're less threatening. Anytime you have the word threat in a program, it kind of gets people on edge. Insider risk program talks more about the holistic view of a program versus a specific threat. And if you're talking about malicious behavior, you're talking about compromised user, data exfiltration, you're really talking about how a user and what the risk of that user is as they're accessing data and systems. I mean, for some, insider risk kind of can mean user activity monitoring. For some, it can be data loss prevention. For others, it can mean continuous evaluation, even continuous vetting or verification. All those names really make up, a successful program. But each one of those programs, you think about it, really rely on a couple things. Programs are centered around a person's behavior and the visibility around how a user interacts with data and systems. All those programs, for whatever name you want to call them, are centered around human behavior and visibility. So it's funny. Now that we're in the COVID world, for this year, and next year we're going to kind of come out of it. Everybody's really confident we will. Before we kind of got in an environment, did you notice that what RSA's kind of theme was? The human element, the human touch, the human approach. And Forcepoint has actually been looking at that for about 2 years. I know when I was with Forcepoint, we came up with the human touch, the human approach, the human element. And now other industry people are embracing that theme, whether it's RSA, whether it's Gartner, looking at, the SaaS and platforms and about how you're delivering different edge technologies are built around a human being, about a human's behavior. Then if you look at zero trust, what's zero trust about? All about engaging with the person, understanding if that person has the confidence level to access specific information or access specific data. So it's all focused around an individual. It's all focused around a human. But you know what? Whatever your program's called, the key to it is really focused in on the context of the events. I mean, not just the events themselves. I mean, we've been living in a world where all we do is kind of look at events, right? Where we're triaging events. You probably have a number of times that people say, I need to get through 10,000 events in a day. I need to get through 50,000 events. I need to look at my DLP console or my insider threat console and I need to triage all these events. Well, that's great. Events are critical. But if you don't have the context around those events, they're just noise. And you need a context around those events to make key decision-making process. I mean, in the past, we used to have blacklisting where we kind of had IP addresses and said, we can't let you go to these IP addresses. And then all of a sudden we have whitelisting. You can go to these ones. But we live in a world of the gray. We live in the middle where you need to kind of make those decisions of maybe it's not bad, it's not good, it's somewhere in the middle. And you need that kind of context to make those decisions around those gray areas. I mean, if you look at one of the main themes that we had from a Forcepoint perspective, it's always, can't we free the good and we want to stop the bad? We don't want to be in the world of event-centric. We want to be in the world of human-centric. And that's where it fits, behavior-centric modeling. Now, digital transformation, it's kind of funny. I mean, we're in it now. I mean, we are knee deep in the digital transportation. The COVID, the remote workforce has really kind of thrown everybody into this new model where we have more and more applications that we're hosting in the cloud, more and more people that are working from home, more and more people that are not using, for example, corporate assets, or using BYOD. So if you look at the digital transformation, it's all about, for example, risk. It's all about looking at the different sectors, whether you have cloud, whether you have data, where you have workforce moving to the cloud, where you have employees and partners collaborating. This all makes it difficult for an organization to have the visibility of all these different elements. You think about it. All these different elements that are even prominent today or make it more and more difficult for the people to maintain, the companies to maintain of their diverse employee workforce. I mean, if you look at data cracks me up because data is the new oil. That's the oil that makes the engine run. It's the artificial intelligence, the new engine of the digital economy. If you look at workforce, you have devices, you have business processes, you have the globally hyperconnect, you have BYOD, you have cloud infrastructure, you have Box, Workday, you have all these applications. And then you have the employees and the partners and the collaborating across all these things. But you know what? You know what's consistent in all these elements, in each one of these? It's you and I. We're the consistent part. We're the consistent part about where data and where systems interface. We are the glue because it's the individuals, no matter how much automation you have within a system, it's the individuals who are sometimes creating the most risk. And it's the individuals where you have to monitor their activity or observe their activity of how they kind of interchange with Box, interchange with Office 365, how they're using Salesforce applications, how they're using LinkedIn, how they're using other applications like social media, Facebook, Instagram, email, traditional BYOD devices. So all those elements, everybody, we're in the middle. In the kind of sooner you recognize that from a corporation point of view, the sooner you realize that the humans are in the center of the data, you'll be able to kind of gauge where you are at from a cybersecurity point of view. You'll be able to determine how the best it is to mitigate these resources. I mean, if you ask yourself a couple things, you ask yourself two things. First, what is the best way to reduce the risk? Second, is it easier today? Did digital transfer make it harder today? To you, to me, I would think that it's going to be a little harder because guess what? You don't own a lot of that data. You don't own a lot of that data. You don't own that data. You don't own those systems, Office 365. So it makes your challenge even harder. So what can you do, right? What's the problem? How can we fix it? Well, the first thing is, step one, you got to focus in on human behavior. It's complex. It's voluminous. A successful program will require you to actually develop or procure some automated adaptive risk and management process, because guess what? You can't humanly go through all the data that you're going to require for a program. You need technology to help sift through all the data and actually bubble up what you need to focus on, bubble up where your high risk users are. And then also being able to close that loop, right? Being able to automate control points, instrument control points, being able to say, you know what? I see a high risk user. I might want to use my technology. Maybe it's user activity monitoring. Maybe it's data leak prevention. Maybe it's web security. And I want to use my technology to actually maybe audit a person's actions more, maybe increase the auditing. You might want to mitigate. You might want to block more. But it's that adaptive risk management, ability to both automate and adaptively control and instrument different technologies. And the third point has to be holistic. You can't have point solutions. I mean, we've kind of built our world around, I'm going to get a solution, a DLP solution to this. I'm going to get an analytics solution to do that. I'm going to have a user activity monitoring solution to this. I'm going to have my cloud security to do that. Well, if those solutions aren't talking together, that are not seamlessly integrated together, that are not working off the same analytics or working off the same decision tree, you're just going to be left with a bunch of point solutions that are going to cause more work, that are more resource intensive, So you have an analysts that are looking at a DLP console. You have analysts that you're looking at an analytics console. You have an analyst that are looking at a web security console. You have an analyst that are working at user activity monitoring consoles. If you can bring all that information, all those different technologies into one converged platform, now you can reduce your resources. They can be more effective and efficient. And the best thing about it, you can have behavioral intelligence that's driving action. Let me give you an example. So let's start on the right. This is a great graph, by the way. I love this graph because it really shows you how the regular activities complemented with different concerning behaviors, stressors, or predispositions tell a different story, kind of fill in the missing pieces. So if you look on the right, so if you were only collecting or only monitoring kind of communication or regular activities, you might see different communication with competitors from an individual, from a user. Now, this could be a flag, but a lot of us have worked for competitors, right? We're in a highly skilled work environment. I mean, every day you get probably LinkedIn announcements that say, hey, there's a job opening here or the job opening there. Every day you talk to other vendors, you talk to other primes, you talk to other partners out there. So everybody is communicating with everybody. I mean, we're in a world of defense contractors. I mean, there's a plenty of opportunities for everybody out there from regular activities. So just getting that piece of information, it's useful, but not that useful. So say we add in a next part about concerning behaviors. We're looking across, for example, different clearance levels, beyond your current needs. So say, for example, I'm trying to gather information or trying to access details that's above my current level. Or maybe I'm testing the security boundaries of my company. I'm trying to access different databases. I'm trying to access different systems. Okay, that's a little concerning. So it's concerning, and I have regular activities that I'm communicating with competitors. So now I'm building my kind of where I stand, where the pendulum sits. Now, if you add in some stressors, now this could be I've been passed over for a promotion. I'm kind of a little bit in financial debt, whether it's, I'm not able to pay my bills, whether I'm, maybe have a gambling issue, maybe I have something, maybe I have a personnel, kind of a change in marital status. Maybe I have to pay for my children's education and I just don't have the money. So those stressors combined with the concerning behavior, combined with regular activities, now you're starting to paint the picture. And then finally, you have some predispositions. You might be talking about specific code words or projects in your social or professional network, whether it's LinkedIn, maybe it's your Instagram, maybe your Facebook. Then you're talking about, for example, you kind of pulled back. So you're not communicating with the regular people you usually communicate at work. So you're kind of being isolated. You're pulling back. So if you add the regular activities, the concerning behaviors, the stressors, and the predispositions, now you understand that this individual is a potential high-risk employee for either moving data outside the organization, or it could be intent to harm. Maybe they're stressed out, intent to self, all these things together. And that's the holistic view. It's not one piece of this puzzle. You have to put all the pieces together to give you that holistic view, to give you that user risk score. So what's that really mean? Right? You have a human context. I have device context. So I'm looking at all those predispositions. I have the device context. So I'm looking at different things from attributes of the device type, exposure. And then I talked a little bit about activity context. But in all honesty, all those things really means nothing until you get the risk adaptive protection. Because you have to be able to close the loop. You have to be able to go left of breach, left of boom. If you're able to take all the human context, the device context, the activity context, pull those into a risk adaptive protection where you're generating and actually producing behavioral intelligence that can be used to drive action. So you can take those actions and put it to an external vendor's tool. You could use an IAM, you could use DLP, and you're kind of closing the loop. So you can take action without a person's kind of intervenence. You don't need an analyst to sit there and go, well, I don't know if that's either a high risk or not risk. You're letting technology take the subjectivity out of a risk score. So how do we do it? So the way Forcepoint does, and this is great, by the way, we actually have the ability to kind of look across an individual. We use our behavior analytics, to kind of drive different data models. So we bring our sensors in, whether it's a user activity monitoring sensor, whether it's a DLP sensor, whether it's external attributes or external data, we drive that into our analytics. And then we look at certain outliers. We look at certain anomalies. And you can see as we build the anomalies, you see the individual risk score goes up. You see that the person copied an average amount of data. Okay, small baseline. They had a massive download of data, which had increased the countermeasures. You do a monitor only, and then you can finally get to blocking the exfiltration. So you climb the ladder as we see significant changes in bad behavior. So you're doing this automated. Because the first thing you want to do is you don't just want to go automatically to block, because you might have a bunch of false positives. You would monitor, gather more intelligence, gather more data, get a stronger case for user risk score, and then potentially move up the block. But that's only one part. As individuals, we fluctuate up and down. I mean, your risk might be up one month, down another month, based upon where you're at. You have this sinusoidal look. So just as important as the risk going up, your risk can go down, because your risk reduces over time. As we normalize, as I normalize, as I change a role, we normalize closer to baseline. So your risk can go up, which could impact the way control points are instrumented, from monitoring to increasing countermeasures to blocking. But your risk can also go down over time, where you reduce those countermeasures, you reduce those active responses. So being able to climb up the ladder and down the ladder is just a critical for any kind of risk adaptive or any kind of insider threat risk program. In every risk program will not be you have to have a use case, right? You have to be able to demonstrate it. And I wanted to throw this out one because it's very important to show how effective kind of that risk adaptive approach is. As you can see right here, we actually probed kind of at a Fortune 100 company, large company. We kind of threw in what we had data leak prevention, and we kind of added in dynamic data protection. So we wanted to see what we could drive from business outcomes. What is the positive business outcomes that could be driven by adding data leak prevention with our risk adaptive dynamic data protection? Now, dynamic data protection for Forcepoint means all about data exfiltration. So you can have other models that drive risk adaptive, whether it's a malicious user, intent to harm, compromiser. But for this sake, we're going to focus on data exfiltration. And you can see by the stats what it did. So if you look at the incidents, you're thinking to yourself, wow, Mike, that's 400,000 down to 165,000. That's still a lot of incidents. But take your mind away from the incidents. Because remember, we're not doing event-centric. We're looking at high-risk users. So focus in on this. Focus in on the 11 users at risk 4 that were prompted. One user at risk 5 was blocked, meaning that through our dynamic data protection in just a 30-day period, we were able to identify 4 high-risk or 11 high-risk users at level 4 that we prompted, that we did that increased kind of mitigation, increased monitoring. And oh, by the way, we found one user that we actually had a risk 5 and we properly mitigated them. We blocked them. So this is driving positive business outcomes. So you're no longer getting into, because if you decrease from 400,000 to 165, who cares in incidents, right? Who really cares? The biggest thing to care about, if I'm a business, I'm worrying about this. 11 users at risk 4 were prompted. 1 user at risk 5 was blocked. This is business outcome. You did it by improving your security model, you lower your resources, and actually you're meeting your compliance requirements. This is the business outcomes that risk adaptive dynamic data protection. This is what you should strive for from a company. Now, as Forcepoint, we believe in a lot of things, but we also believe in continuous evaluation. We continuous evaluation of users' interaction with not only data to surface those malicious risks, to compromise users and data loss. So looking at a more effective unit of measurement, being able to get you that meaningful visibility. And I'm going to say that again, meaningful visibility, because visibility by itself is useless. You need to pinpoint what information, what you can utilize, whether you have analytics, whether you have a risk adaptive approach. And then finally being able to orchestrate those control points and get left of breach. All three of these will get you to your proactive nature, will drive your business outcomes. And then finally, I think everybody forgets it. You have to be able to develop in privacy. From the beginning, privacy is a big concern. All this, whether you're collecting information, has to be kind of developed with privacy in mind. And it can't be an afterthought. You have to develop privacy from the beginning. Your developers, your security engineers, your engineers that are developing the code need to consider how you respect the privacy of an individual, how the individual respects the privacy of a corporation, and how those two things meet together. So this is my kind of start into zero trust. We want to kind of touch on this because I think it's kind of a little bit an extension of an insider risk program, an extension of an insider threat program. Zero trust is coming. I think we all know it's coming. You kind of look at security the way it's coming. Zero trust is kind of that extension, and as the next piece to really kind of trusting and verifying individuals from when they're accessing data and accessing systems. So zero trust is here to stay. And how we think about zero trust from a force point of view is kind of similar in vein to what our vision is and what our strategy is. It falls underneath the human behavior category, where we're using our analytics and our behavioral intelligence as the engine, where we're integrating with other technologies like identity access management tools, and we're pulling information in from those external sources. So say, for example, you had an Okta or a ping that's feeding our engine, that are feeding our zero trust engine. And then we're developing those risk scores, and we have our DLP, and we have our user activity monitoring solution, and we have other sensors that are feeding our analytics. And oh, by the way, we're going to take maybe some HR data, maybe we'll take, some network data, and we're driving this holistic user risk score. So what's the cool thing about it is that these identity access management tools, they can take advantage of our risk score. They can use our risk score and our risk levels to actually control different control points and different accesses from an individual. So say, for example, Mike Kraus, I'm showing a risk level of 4. Risk level 4 is high. So the identity access management tool could consume my risk level 4. And inside the identity access management tool, they can say, if anybody within our organization hits risk level 4, we want to kind of change their access from single factor to multi-factor authentication. Or we do not want them to access specific database or specific systems. So now you're not only allowing Forcepoint products to take advantage of our risk scores, but you're letting external products take advantage of those same risk scores. So remember, converged platform, holistic view. So from a company point of view, or an organization point of view, you can take advantage of existing security tools, apply our Forcepoint behavior analytics with our risk score, and actually help drive not only Forcepoint technology, endpoints and sensors and our web security, but also I drive other identity access management tools or other external control points. Very powerful message that you could utilize within your organization. So finally, we get to the end, and I think this is the most important for everybody. It's all about the name, right? The name is important because it sets the tone for the program. I mean, you could have a name that says Employee Appreciation Program. I think that's a very good name. Employee Awareness Program. I would not recommending having names like Big Brother. That's probably not the best thing to call a program, because once again, you want to start gathering trust from an individual. You want your teams and your company and your employees to buy into your program. You want your employees to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. So having a name that is conducive to welcoming, crowdsourcing type of program, that's ideal. And remember, and I kind of put 5 or 6 thoughts on there. This is my top 6 list. Everybody has a top 10, a top 7. I made a top 6 list. So here's your top 6 things to remember. And please take these with you. These are very important. Place people and data at the center of your design thinking from the start. Number 2, ensure meaningful visibility. 3, implement privacy by design. It's not a nice to have, it's a must have. Shift from events to a risk and behavior centric approach. Remember, human behavior. Remember, everybody in industry coming aboard, it's all about human behavior, the human touch. Human is essential. 5, enable adaptive responses. Whether you mitigate or not, whether you active block or not. You can increase the auditing, you can increase monitoring through risk adaptive responses. Number 6, focus the use cases on the user and data protection. When you go into any organization, make sure you have the laser focus of what you want to get out of your analytics, what you want to get out of your cybersecurity tools. Make sure they're aligned with business outcomes. Remember that? Align with business outcomes. If you can show positive business outcomes, you'll be better off. You'll get funding. You'll have different stakeholders that will come to the table and want to invest in your programs. So focus your use cases, user and data protection, on business outcomes. And finally, as we begin this journey together, remember, it's all in a name. Thank you, and have a great day.
Mike, thank you so much. That was great.
Appreciate it, Carolyn. Do we have any questions out there?
I do have some questions for you. So the number one question coming in is, what are the biggest barriers to implementing an insider threat program?
Well, it's interesting you say that. The first person that probably comes to people's mind is, it's got to be privacy, right? Got to be privacy because we're collecting all this data. You're doing user activity monitoring. It's Big Brother. No, privacy is not a big issue these days. Now, some within GDPR, European, I get it. With unions, councils, we have to address it, and we do address it. But you know, one of the biggest things is infrastructure, is resources. Mm-hmm. Not having the experts, not having people that have the knowledge of how to build an insider risk program, how to have done it before. And we're seeing more and more. I mean, we just talked about it, I think a couple of weeks ago, about, the same questions we're being asked are the same thing we answered 2 years ago. It seems people are recirculating and new people are coming in that have never thought about insider threat. They're coming in with an IT background. They don't know how to build insider risk programs. And I think that's the challenge of educating people, to getting them to the point to understand the value of insider threat, what the value of insider risk programs are, and that they're different than data. They're different than what they've done before. This isn't an IT project. This could be a risk project, a compliance project, but it's not IT.
So when you say infrastructure, you're referring more to personnel.
Both. Personnel is a big one, but it also could be cloud. As we move forward, and I think one of the biggest things is that we're seeing a shift from on-premise because it comes down to privacy. When we get better, as the vendors get better at securing data, protecting data, people are moving more to the cloud. Because guess what? It's easier to implement. It's easier to make changes. We could make a change in a cloud infrastructure without touching your system on site or on premise. Now, trust me, hybrid technologies will always be there because you're going to have large financial institutions, large integrators, government. They're always going to want to have their stuff on premise. We get it. But for some of the mid-markets, some of the people that don't have the cost, don't have the money to build an infrastructure, don't have the resources, they might need a managed service offering as well, to have somebody, the experts, manage it for them. Because I've had clients go, boy, I just want you to tell me who my high-risk people are, give me the evidence, and let me go do my investigations.
And can we do that? I mean, are we like SASE?
Yes. We're SaaS. Yes, we are. We're actually deploying a user protection platform that's coming out at the end of September. Will be full SaaS platform. We have already our dynamic data protection that works in the cloud. And our SaaS protection, or DUP, we're going to call it dynamic user protection, will actually enable organizations to kind of quickly deploy an endpoint agent. We'll be able to drive those analytic results into a cloud-based kind of database or analytics offering. And then we'll also be able to, remember I talked about weaponizing or instrumenting control points? Yes. We'll also be able to take our user protection platform and actually instrument our DLP to mitigate at the endpoint. Not only mitigate at the endpoint, but take those same risk levels and actually drive into web security and mitigate from a CASB or web security as well. So having that will all be SaaS available. That'll be the converged platform. It's going to be pretty exciting for clients.
And does that lower the cost to be SASE?
It lowers the cost for the organizations because guess, we're going to be managing it. So we're going to be taking the burden of not giving you hardware. We're going to give you the management part of it. So we're going to handle that, lessons learned, best practices. We're building what we call indicators of behavior. So we'll be building that through our X labs, being able to kind of look for the next cutting edge of what we see as insider threat. We're also going to be able to take kind of, remember I talked about crowdsourcing, we're also going to be able to look across all our customers and say, boy, we're noticing this type of behavior over in this financial organization. Boy, this financial organization will get the same impact. So we build it across our whole platform so that all our customers take advantage of everybody's lessons learned.
That's powerful.
Keeping in mind, responsible with privacy, respecting everybody's systems, will not expose anybody. But that's the power. You get all that together.
But you share the threats, right?
Exactly.
That is powerful.
Yeah. And you do it on endpoint, by the way. Which
so
is
leveraging cloud, you're solving this biggest barrier that you've been seeing. You're solving the infrastructure of personnel and
we're still building actionable intelligence. And that's the big thing. We want to build actionable intelligence. I just don't want another bookend. I don't want another, kind of dead weight out there. We have too many technologies that sit on the shelf that aren't being used. We're not building that. We want technology that people use and use on a regular basis.
All right. So my next question, you talked about continuous evaluation, and I'm curious to know how widely that's being embraced and implemented if you get a lot of pushback with the continuous evaluation.
We actually don't. We're actually getting people that want us to adopt it for them and want us to move forward rapidly. The problem is that there's a lot of different data sources that in the past have not been brought together. So fusing all those data sources together, and it's not fusing them together and ingesting, it's actually pulling out what information is useful.
And when you say data sources, you mean like physical badging, HR resources? That's what we're talking
for continuous evaluation, it's not so much a physical badging. That's more of in your operationals. What I'm talking about is continuous evaluation is looking at financial records for people who hold clearances, say, or it could be marital status. It could be other indicators that, remember we talked about those stressors, those dispositions, all that stuff that we talked about. That's kind of the continuous evaluation, getting all that information in a place that you could make sense of it. So it's just not one piece of data by itself. It's actually another piece of data, another piece of data. So for example, say, you had a change in marital status. Okay, people get divorced all the time. It happens. Trust me. But say you had a change in marital status and then, you took out a big loan. And then you saw that your two kids are going to college. So that loan paid there, but you need to pay it off there. And then you're out seeing some other financial debt. Or for example, you had a security violation, right? Or you're under, for example, a PIP. So you have all these external indicators that potentially are driving your risk, zero trust again, being able to say, are you still the same trustworthy person that we had at the beginning when we hired you? Or have you changed? Has your behavior changed? And then taking those indicators and drawing that into a risk score. Now, in the past, insider threat programs and CE programs are over here, right? CE is kind of an extension of insider threat or vice versa. Depends on who you talk to. But there's never been this close coordination. Now there is. Now continuous evaluation, instead of, for example, an insider threat program knowing there's a high-risk user based on external predispositions 3 months ago, that, hey, this person was seeing financial stressors 3 months ago. Oh, yeah, we just noticed them trying to move a bunch of data off the system. That would have been nice to know 3 months ago so we could put them in on enhanced monitoring. We could change their access. We can get in front of it. Now you're seeing some of those, data points together, and you're seeing them share who are the high-risk users, both from an insider threat point of view and a CE point of view. So now we have the total spectrum of zero trust. We have not only seeing day-to-day activities on systems, interacting with systems and data, but you also see all this other stuff that's doing a continuous vetting, continuous evaluation, and you're seeing a full circle. But it's all about, at the end of the day, whether you have an insider threat program, continuous evaluation, you're just continually evaluating. A good friend that we know, trust but verify. I don't know how many times he told me that, but it's always trust but verify.
Yeah. So that leads me to my next question. You talk about this risk scoring, and you showed a slide, and you had 400,000 incidents on one side, and then once you implemented behavioral analytics, those incidents dropped to 165,000.
Yeah,
that's still a lot of incidents.
It is. If you're a company, it's only 30 days too.
Yeah, and how are analysts
They're not looking at those. That's the key thing with dynamic data protection. You're not sitting in front of a dashboard and watching an incident screen. You're not watching an event screen. You're not watching a dashboard of all these single line events. Because remember, incidents events are a single point in time, right? You did something, violate a policy through an event, right? That's one point of data. That's one point data source in a point of time. Like I could actually do something. I access the data classification. I moved it to an internal media. I emailed it out. That could be 7 different events.
Right.
But what was it? Was that actually a risky activity? No. I have permission. I downloaded it. I emailed it. I emailed it to somebody else. That shouldn't have been 7 events. But the way policies are and the way DLP policies are sometimes, you need that granularity to collect the information that fires an event. So what we're doing is saying, okay, that's great. Events are good, but events should be fed into a larger analytics behavior intelligence solution to say, okay, I'm going to use these events to drive somebody's risk score. I'm going to look at somebody not just at a single point in time. I'm going to look at them over a period of time. I'm going to look for outliers. I'm going to look for indicators. I'm going to look for changes in behavior. I'm going to use external data sources as well to say, is my role. Mike Kraus changed role. He's now in IT. Guess what? Mike's new role in IT, I can access this information. I can move this information over to here because that's my role. So it's no longer an incident, not an event, not a high-risk user because I have a different role. But say, for example, Mike's role has changed, but his behavior also is changing, meaning that as an IT, I've never accessed this database. And now I'm accessing a database I've never done before. So that's an outlier. Now that could elevate my risk score. But as an analyst, I'm not watching the screen. I'm not sitting there going, there's 100,000 events. I have to clear 10,000 in a day. Because that's what people are doing. Yeah. They have a metric. I talked to a company the other day and I asked them, I was like, how many are you dealing with? And they're saying, oh, we have about 100,000 that come in a day. And I was like, what's your metric? And go, well, we have about, X analysts, whatever they have. And our goal is to clear all incidents by the end of the day. Do you think they're actually looking at risk? Do you think they're actually determining what's somebody who's being risky and kind of behavior?
It's not even possible.
No. Because their metric is clearing it by the end of the day. So if I'm an analyst, I'm like clicking, going clear, escalate, clear. So you're not really doing your company service as well as your employees because all you're doing looking at is a single point of time. Yeah. Point products.
So the
bring it up a level.
Is correlating and automating.
Yeah. Yes. It's correlating, automating, and actually providing behavioral intelligence. That's the big thing.
All right. So final question. Love me a good raccoon video.
I do too.
Help me understand what that has to do with zero trust.
All right. So you saw by the raccoon, he's very inquisitive. He comes in, he comes to the door. I mean, I had a dog door. My dogs do the same thing. They peek their head through, they look what's inside. The first thing they do is kind of look for the carpet to steal. So he sees kind of playing around. So it's kind of the same thing with zero trust. Zero trust your door, right? It's your door. And at some point you think who's coming in that door, right? You think everything about the door. But then all of a sudden there's something that disrupts your knowledge and your thinking. So it disrupts you because now you see a new animal, a new person, a new individual, a new behavior that creeps into your door. So the raccoon's your new behavior. It's something you were not aware of, something you couldn't plan for. But if you have, like, for example, a system that can identify that, a raccoon is my new behavior. I need now to change my, systems, change my data, maybe change my risk models to account for this new behavior, who's a raccoon. And oh, by the way, I also need to close the door. And the zero trust could be locking the door. You could actually lock the door from 11 at night to 5 in the morning because you don't want any kind of unapproved, animals getting into your house. So zero trust is about knowing your environment, continuously evaluating your environment, in this case, who's coming to my door, and then be able to take action based upon what you're seeing. In this case, it would be locking the door. And zero trust could lock the door. Remember we talked about the identity access management integration? Yeah. Your door could be your identity access management tool. Because guess what identity access management tools do? They close the door, right? Mm-hmm. They shut the door. They change your permission. They lock you out. Right. Well, we could feed the door, the identity access management, and they would lock the door. So see how that plays full circle on that? Yep, get it. So yeah, and everybody loves a good raccoon story. Well, yeah, I mean, you have to have the raccoon video in there. And he's so cute. It's so cute. Well, thanks, Mike, very much. And thanks, Carolyn. Have you back. Okay. Perfect.
Bye.
Bye-bye.